The Kentucky Republican Party is celebrating a milestone. There's now more registered Republican voters than Democrats. That was announced late last week by the State Board of Elections. WYMT's Phil Pendleton reports on the changing political landscape in Kentucky and what Republican leaders and the Democratic governor have to say about it.
This has been a trend that has really started growing over the last 12 to 14 years or so. More people either changing their voter registration to Republican or more stating that they want to vote Republican when they go and register to vote. And today, Republican leaders say this clearly shows that the people of Kentucky want a change. The chairman of the Kentucky Republican Party calls it a historic milestone, and others gathered in the rotunda today said that it shows a difference in how Kentuckians view policy now than decades ago when Democrats carried a more than 2-to-1 advantage over Republicans in voter registrations. Legislative leaders say Kentuckians are backing their policy decisions.
The direction we have placed this state on, reducing taxes, being more competitive, creating jobs.
Governor Andy Beshear says this just shows that both parties have about 1.6 million registered voters in each, with Republicans holding the slight advantage of several thousand people.
I think what that says is we need to get along. We shouldn't be out there flexing, talking about who's dominant. We ought to be trying to get along.
It is interesting to note that according to that graph that was shown today in the Capitol Rotunda, the number of Democratic registered voters has remained relatively flat or stable over the last number of years. That has also showed the number of Republican registered voters to have risen. In Frankfort, Phil Pendleton, now back to you.
Republican leaders say a lot of the momentum was started by Senator Mitch McConnell, but the credit goes to Kentuckians. One of the former Minneapolis police officers convicted of violating George Floyd's civil rights was sentenced today. Thomas Lane is getting 2.5 years in federal prison for his role in the deadly restraint of Floyd on a Minneapolis street in May 2020. Prosecutors wanted more than twice that. He will be required to pay mandatory restitution and be under supervised release for 2 years after he gets out of prison. During today's hearing, the judge said Lane had a minimal role in the incident and that he is a person of outstanding character. The federal sentence comes a month after he pleaded guilty in state court to aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. He's set to be sentenced in that case in September. The final phase of the sentencing trial of the Parkland, Florida school shooter picked up again this morning. This is day 4 of that trial. The defense asked for anything that happened after the shooting, including Nicholas Cruz running into students at a Subway and Walmart, to not be included as part of the evidence. The defense said it is not part of the crime and Cruz could not have planned for those events and who he would see after the shooting. The prosecution said that it is relevant to the bigger picture of Cruz's actions.
I'm going to allow the state to present this testimony as part of putting the overall incident in context.
Last October, Nicholas Cruz pleaded guilty to the murders of 14 students and 3 staff members at Parkland's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School on February 14, 2018. He also pleaded guilty to 17 counts of attempted murder. The jury will decide whether Cruz receives a sentence of life in prison without parole or death by lethal injection. They must be unanimous for Cruz to get the death penalty. If at least one votes for life, that will be Cruz's sentence. This morning today we have a graphic example of the public anger over the school massacre in Uvalde, Texas, and how it can boil over. CBS's Lilia Luciano shows us an emotional encounter between the gunman's mother and one victim's family captured on video, and we want to warn you it may be hard to watch.
A tense confrontation was caught on camera by a Telemundo news crew.
You have no right to judge my son. No, you don't.
It shows Adriana Martinez, the mother of the attacker, responding to the family of Amerie Jo Garza, one of the 19 children murdered at Robb Elementary.
Why did you call the cops to begin with? I didn't know.
Martinez then apologizes.
I know my son was a coward. You don't think I don't know that?
Since the shooting, emotions in Uvalde have been raw.
I can't help but wonder if they just didn't find our children worthy of being saved.
Just 3 days ago, the community blasted the school board for not firing its chief of police, Pete Arredondo.
Why the hell does he still have a job with y'all?
And after all the backlash, yesterday the school superintendent recommended that Arredondo be terminated. The school board may vote on whether to fire him this Saturday. Arredondo, who was placed on leave last month, has come under intense scrutiny for his perceived inaction and is now facing even more condemnation after body camera footage outlined a botched response from his and other departments.
Can you hear me, sir? Please put your firearm down.
But in that video, Arredondo is heard trying to negotiate with the shooter. Active shooter training instructs the officers to immediately stop the threat. He told Texas lawmakers he thought his priority was to protect children in other classrooms and didn't consider himself the incident commander. The family of 10-year-old victim Josiah Garcia can't comprehend why officers were standing around waiting.
If they would have breached earlier, they could have saved some kids.
Lilia Luciano, Uvalde, Texas.
A total of 21 people were killed during that mass shooting. A mural displaying the faces of 18 Americans detained overseas, including U.S. basketball star Brittany Griner, who's been held in Russia since February on drug charges, has been installed on the side of a building in a narrow alley just a few miles west of the White House. The opening of the mural is the latest act of public advocacy by the families of detainees who have in recent months significantly stepped up their calls to U.S. President Joe Biden to personally intervene to bring their loved ones home. The poster was pasted on the side of the building on Tuesday together with the families of the detainees. The artist says the collaborative form of art captures the plight of the families who are trying to make their cause known with their modest means.
To be with the family members and to help them put the last portion of their son's hat on the mural, or to line up the smile so it's just right. Yeah. It's very meaningful, it's very powerful, and I think that you can see, you don't need to know the stories behind the photos to know just how much they mean to these family members.
The United States does not provide an official figure for how many U.S. citizens are detained abroad, but the James W. Foley Legacy Foundation, named after an American journalist abducted and killed in Syria, says that more than 60 U.S. citizens are wrongfully detained in about 18 countries.
Still watching hot temperatures around the mountains this afternoon, and even more on the way as we head into the next few days. Outside at the moment, plenty of blue sky and sunshine. Buffalo Mountain here in Perry County, mid-80s out there at the moment. Downtown Whitesburg, even fewer clouds out in portions of Letcher County. They sit at 85, but a dew point in the low 70s means it feels closer to 90. Many of us in the middle and upper 80s at this hour. We still have a couple of hours of warming to go before we start to diminish those temperatures back into the 70s overnight. Dew points are in the 70s, so I don't expect a whole lot of cooling below that as we head into tonight. All is quiet around the mountains, maybe a shower in southwest Virginia. That's about it. We'll continue to watch those clouds push on to the east and as our front continues to work on out of the region. So keep that WYMT weather app handy. You might need it, if only to talk about how hot the weather is going to be over the next few days. For us tonight, down into the upper 60s as we finish things off for our Thursday and kickstart our Friday. The very latest on how hot we could get and when relief might finally move in, that's coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
All right, Evan, thank you. More than 2 years into the pandemic, President Biden has tested positive for COVID-19. CBS's Deborah Alfarone has the latest from the White House.
Fresh off a visit to Massachusetts.
We need to act.
And a 4-day trip overseas.
The United States is going to remain an active, engaged partner in the Middle East.
President Biden has tested positive for COVID-19. Epidemiologist and CBS News contributor Dr. Celine Gounder spoke about the president's case.
He's been double vaccinated and double boosted. He is a healthy 79-year-old. He also has started Paxlovid, which we know further reduces the risk of hospitalization.
The president's doctor said those mild symptoms include runny nose, fatigue, and an occasional dry cough.
I understand that the symptoms are light. I hope they continue to be so. That was my experience, and I hope that that's the case for the president.
The president had a crime prevention event scheduled in Pennsylvania today, but the White House says he will stay in isolation until he tests negative. Deborah Alfarone, CBS News, the White House.
Vice President Kamala Harris, who previously recovered from COVID-19, tested negative for the virus this morning. She was last with the president on Tuesday. Coming up on First at 4, the supply of baby formula powder in stores is at its lowest level since the shortage began earlier this year.
And the heat looks dangerous as we head into the weekend. Not necessarily with the upper 60s tonight. We've got the very latest on the heat on the way. That's next.